Hey, guess what? I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. Okay. Okay. All right. I am back, you guys, and we are back with Sacred Contracts Reinventing the Wheel. Now, y'all know it's been a minute. I know it's been a minute. Judge somebody else, okay? Don't judge me. And if you do, that's fine, because I don't really care no way. I'm not tripping. I love myself, okay? Anyway, we are back in Sacred Contracts, y'all. And we are talking about reinventing the wheel. And it's been so long. I almost feel like I should just start this chapter over because it's been so long. So if you need a refresher, it's fine. Go back and watch my last video. Also, there is a Sacred Contract playlist, so you don't have to scroll through all different videos. But we are going to pick off a little bit where we left off. Just a little bit. I'm going to go back a little bit, right? So, let's start by talking about the astrological chart and the archetypal wheel, okay? Like an astrological chart, the purpose of the archetypal wheel is to expand your understanding of yourself. Okay, specifically, the wheel is a medium through which your archetypal patterns can best communicate their role in unfolding your sacred contract. Your archetypes are like magnets, drawing together the essential elements required for an experience to manifest, including the people with whom you have contracts and the points at which you are to make important choices. Each of the houses is also aligned with the energies of one or more chakras, where their areas of influence overlap. This confluence of energy should help you get a deeper picture of the nature of your archetypal houses. The first house of the astrological chart represents the ego and the personality. The archetype that falls into that house represents the dominant unconscious pattern of influence of your ego and personality, because it is the house that grounds you in the world and rules your sense of who you are. It is aligned with the energies of both the first and third chakras. Many are able to identify the exact archetypes, while others usually describe characteristics that are associated with an archetype. The archetype that rules our first house projects the initial impression people have on meeting us. And knowing what your archetypal mask is can be a great social advantage. According to astrological teachings, each of the 12 houses in a natal chart represents a different focus of your life. The 12 houses of the wheel provide a format through which you can evaluate how your archetypes operate in your daily life, both literally and symbolically. The 8th house, for instance, labeled other people's resources, and a figure that I will post for you guys. It relates to other people's money and how you use it, into the inheritances and legal matters. Your inheritance can refer not only to your financial legacy, but also to your DNA and ancestral biological memory, as well as to your inherited tribal attitudes and beliefs going back a generation or a millennium. Even though you can interpret your archetypes and their houses literally, you want to stretch their meaning into a symbolic purpose or aspect. If you stop at the literal meaning of a word, you may get frustrated because you cannot always literally see a connection between an archetypal pattern and the meaning of the house in which it falls. You want to, for instance, see the literal meaning of what is taking place in front of your eyes. But, for instance, okay, so emotional, psychological, and genetic inheritance They are just as real, if not more, than money and property. So when considering your inheritances, please consider physical, attitudinal, and emotional characteristics you share with your family as well. When you are trying to interpret the meaning of any archetypal pattern within its house, consider all sides of the image and the information it holds. By doing this, you will create a fuller portrait of all the patterns and purpose of your life. Remember, your archetypes are your guides to discerning your contracts and achieving your divine potential. All your archetypal patterns are certainly present in concerns of each of the 12 houses, for they interact as one hologram-like system within the psyche. Nonetheless, one pattern takes the lead regarding the theme of each house. We will get into more of that at a later chapter. So now we're going to go through the meaning of the houses themselves. Okay, so if you look at the picture above, this is called making your houses your home. This is a figure of the archetypal wheel. And now we're going to talk about the first house. The first house represents ego and personality. It aligns with the first and third chakras. In an astrological chart, the 12 houses correspond to the 12 signs of the zodiac and to 4 cosmic energies: earth, air, fire, and water. The houses of the archetypal wheel share some of these same characteristics. The first house of the archetypal wheel corresponds to the astrological signs of Aries, the first house of the zodiac. Beginning on the first day of spring, it represents new beginnings. And since Aries is also a fire sign, this house has the climate of passion that animates birth, including the birth of self and constant rebirthing we undergo as we mature. And so the archetypes take up energy in your persona. Your identity, your self-esteem, and awareness of your ego lay the groundwork for your life. How you conduct yourself with others and whether you have the strength to make your way without needing to ask for another's permission depends on how well you succeed at the many challenges that awaken your need to take charge of who you are. The second house is the life values. It's aligned with the second chakra. The second house of the archetypal wheel corresponds to Taurus, an earth sign that rules your relationship to the land in its broadest sense. It represents what you most value and hold dear. In energy terms, the second house represents the next stage in the formation of self. Now that I'm here, what's mine? What do I want out of life? What power is essential to my interacting with physical life? This house represents your appreciation for the physical nature of life, the objects of this earth that appeal to your ego and spirit, and what you need most to feel grounded in the world. This house most reflects which objects or energy you associate with earthly power, money, status, ownership, art, the capacity to control others, sensuality, beauty, things of that nature. These are the most seductive means through which the spirit becomes attached to physical form. The archetype that resides within this house, therefore, is the one that is most aligned with your relationship to physical power and its icons. The challenge of this house is to see beyond the physical form of our attachments to objects, money, status, power, and all other manifestations of the physical world to your spiritual values. People often suffer great anguish because they believe that to be happy, they must possess a particular person, place, or thing, and yet the ability to love unconditionally is analytical to the attachment. Next, we're going to go to the third house. The third house is talking about self-expression and siblings. It aligns with the third and fifth chakras. Once you establish your values, you move into self-expression, how you present what you are and what you hold dear to the world. The third house, aligned with Gemini, an air sign that rules communication, represents your capacity to express yourself as an individual as well as your siblings. The symbolic link of the siblings with communication represents the natural process of specialization, of first discovering your voice among your fellow children. Siblings, therefore, should be interpreted not only as your biological family members, but also those who aid your growth. Because the energy of your third house involves both your sense of self-esteem and your self-expression, it resonates with the third and fifth chakras. It contains the lessons inherent in learning about the cause and effects of your choices. How you view your own power. It reveals how you direct your energy into the world, how you put into motion, and how you engage with the laws of magnetic attraction and cause and effect. You want to become conscious of how you use your personal energy and power, that you become aware of the consequences of your thoughts and deeds. Becoming conscious means awakening to your own power and learning to direct it responsibly. The archetype in residence in your third house influences how you weigh your decisions. Choices that are consciously negative or damaging, especially those aimed at deliberately harming other people, represent the challenge or shadow aspect of the third house. The challenge of the third house is to become conscious of your motivations. Every thought, word, action, and deed is an expression of your power, and ultimately only two genuine motivations stir the psyche: the empowerment or disempowerment of the self and others. Moving on to the fourth house. The fourth house is home. It aligns with the first and the fourth chakras. The fourth house corresponds to Cancer, the first of the three water signs of the zodiac chart. Water is the element associated with our emotional natures. So the archetype that resides within your fourth house has the strongest influence on the foundation of your emotional nature. Your self-expression, be it as an individual or through creation, needs to be grounded to have a home. The fourth house is connected both with the home you came from with your present home. The word or image home clearly has many meanings, and in the dream state, it is often associated with the true residence of the heart or your deepest passion in life. The theme of home that rules this house include your connections to both your biological and your extended families. The archetype that resides in this house is the one that has the leading influence on the emotional energies associated with all that represents home to you. Because the fourth house relates to both your family roots and to your emotional life, it corresponds to the energies of your first and fourth chakras. The challenging aspects of the fourth house can include toxic memories and emotions, the consequences of which can be depression. The challenge of the fourth house is to complete the unfinished business of our childhood years and to establish healthy homes for ourselves as adults. You have a choice between handing down to your children and loved ones your family wounds and patterns of negativity and passing on to them optimism and love of life. Healing your personal history so that you do not pass on your own wounds is therefore essential to creating a healthy home for yourself and your family. Moving on to the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of creativity and good fortune. It aligns with the sixth chakra. The sequence of fire, earth, water, and air is repeated twice in the zodiac archetypal wheel. Leo, the second fire sign, is aligned with the fifth house, which rules creative expression, sexuality, children, and good fortune. This is also the house of love, of abundance, and opportunity. The archetype that resides in this house is the one that represents the strengths that you should most rely on to make things happen. After grounding yourself with a home base, You instinctively move on to exploring the power of creativity and the creation of life. Because the fifth house rules creativity, it corresponds to the sixth chakra, which regulates intelligence and imagination. The shadow aspect of the fifth house manifests as the expression of creative or sexual fire out of control, as in the misuse of sexual power or creativity for selfish or manipulative ends. One can use creative talents for unethical or illegal activities or for sexual seduction and manipulation. Moving on to the sixth house. The sixth house is the house of occupation and health. It aligns with the second chakra. The sixth house corresponds to your second earth sign, which is Virgo, and rules your occupation and health. The earth's energy of Virgo differs from that of Taurus in that its focus is on grounding you as a person to the main work of your life rather than on the physical cycles of nature of the second house. The focus of this house on an occupation is survival oriented, and the archetype that resides here influences how you seek out paths of security. When you are in the midst of a business transaction, your sixth house archetypal pattern will play a very prominent role in the way you interpret business-related conversations and opportunities. The challenge of the sixth house is to balance work and health. An archetype might indicate unhealthy or destructive habits that do not serve your physical well-being, or it might indicate how you negotiate your ethics and morals for the sake of financial and job security. Because this house is involved with money and values, it most closely corresponds to the second chakra. Next, we have the seventh house. The seventh house is the house of marriage and relationships. It aligns with the second and fourth chakras. The seventh house includes marriage as well as other forms of partnerships, such as close friendships and business relationships. This house is aligned with the astrological sign of Libra, the second air sign. Unlike Gemini, which rules communication in general, Libra represents the more intimate kinds of communication between individuals. The central quality associated with Libra is balance, symbolized by a woman carrying a scale. This house is also prime territory for acts of betrayal, which so often reveal the shadow aspects of relationships. Because the seventh house rules both business partnerships and marriage, it corresponds to the energies of the second and fourth chakras, which regulate money, values, and matters of the heart. By our very own biology, we are designed for physical, emotional, and psychological partnerships. Our relationships with one another are prime areas in which to glimpse our contracts. We can also see them through our archetypal partnerships: parent and child, mentor and student, servant and master, for examples. Partnerships can also play out in a more mundane situation. We invest great energy in enjoying, maintaining, or recovering from our relationships, and in the process, we learn more about our motivations. One of the healthiest gifts we can give ourselves is to constantly monitor our reasons for being critical and controlling. The challenge is to allow others to be themselves regardless of our fear or insecurity. Maintain your core relationship to yourself and live accordingly to your truth that the greatest gift you can give another is a fully healthy version of self of your own. Moving on to the eighth house. The eighth house is others people's resources. Others people's resources are stored in the eighth house, and it aligns with the second and sixth chakra. This house corresponds to Scorpio, the second water sign, and water is already noted is the element most connected to your emotional nature. Scorpio is also the ruler of secrets and secret activities, as well as the passionate energies associated with erotic sex. The most closely guarded secrets usually have to do with either sex or money or both. Unlike the second house, which deals with personal ownership, the eighth house rules your use of money in the public arena. The theme of inheritance in this house relates to your financial and legal concerns, your DNA, and your ancestral biological memory. Legal and financial matters involve both your intellect and your sense of values. And so this house is influenced by the energies of the second and sixth chakra. Eighth house issues bring out our darkest shadows. As Benjamin Franklin once said, the true test of a person's character comes through in matters of family inheritance. This house takes our involvement with power outside of our personal lives, marking a passageway into the more public arena of external power. You want to understand the emotional nature of this house because money, sexuality, and secret knowledge are seductions that can block your pursuit of your divine potential. Dealing with these energies can be extremely challenging. It is difficult to remain emotionally centered and empowered where financial and sexual matters are concerned. Money, sex, and power represents authority and security. So when these areas of life are threatened or we perceive them to be threatened, we become extremely fearful and can act irrationally. Expressions of the shadow of this house represent themselves in the arena of legal and financial misconduct, including, among other things, misappropriations of business funds and family conflict over matters of inheritance. In this house, we can also discover the magnificent force of our strength and courage during our most vulnerable experiences in life. Many of the contracts you have with other people come together because of money, sex, and power. And this house, too, carries the potential for betrayal and misunderstanding. Yet, bonds of loyalty and love are also inherited qualities, and this house, an archetype, may be a great source of strength to you. The archetype matched to your eighth house is the one that is your guide into your fears, challenges, and strengths in dealing with money, inheritance, and sexuality. Keep in mind that what lies beneath your fears cannot always be fully understood within the confines of one's house. The archetypes and the houses with which they are partnered are points of entry into your chart. Each entry point provides you with a different specific perspective, but to view your overall contract, you ultimately need to draw on the whole chart. If you had a crisis about how important money is to you or about your resistance to having a full life, you would look at the second house because those are issues of personal value. You should also refer to the house where your saboteur is located to see if a thematic connection exists there. But if you are investigating a business or financial relationship, you would begin the process of interpretation with your 8th house archetype. Then study that same relationship with another archetype and house, proceeding through the wheel one by one. This is like putting a wide-angle lens on your psyche and soul. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the 9th house. The 9th house is where spirituality lies, and it aligns with the 7th chakra. The 9th house, which corresponds to Sagittarius, the fire sign, rules spirituality, religion, travel, and wisdom. The energy of the Sagittarius is associated with boldness and independence, qualities that enhance the quest you are drawn to pursue. The element of Sagittarius fire fuels inspirations, devotions, and the passion to realize an intimate relationship with the divine. While the fire sign Leo that rules the fifth house is strongly linked to the dramatic personality, characteristics, and theatrics, Sagittarius fire lifts a person's spirit into the transcendent pathways in keeping with the symbolism of the center, directing his arrow into the cosmos. The shadow aspects inherited in this house relate to the challenge of managing your spiritual ego, often characterized by the archetype known as the Masonic complex. The ninth and 10th houses sit on top of the chart and represent the guiding forces that help us to remember, however, unconsciously, that life is a spiritual journey and that our role is to act continually on our highest potential. For that reason, both houses are strongly influenced by the energy of the seventh chakra, which regulates our relationship to the divine. The spiritual awakening, referred to as the dark night of the soul, resonates powerfully with the energetic profile of the ninth house. Our contemporary culture has largely shifted from the group practice of religion to the deeply intimate search for an individual spiritual path. While this is a positive movement in our evolution, many people today are attempting to live by the more exacting inner standards once reserved for monastics, but without the privileged environment that once allowed monastics to focus solely on their spiritual practices. The shadow side of this migration of formerly spiritual practice into the mainstream is the potential for spiritual crisis or even madness. Going deep into the self to attempt to make contact with the divine traditionally requires the guidance of someone spiritually equipped to hold your hand through the points of passage into the soul, namely a spiritual director, a guru, or a mother superior, someone. During the process of spiritual introspection, you may descend into profound stages of loneliness and emptiness, detached from emotions and everyday senses, and even ironically develop a feeling of meaninglessness. Yet many people now find themselves in a detached emotional state of mind while struggling at the same time to maintain life on the outside, going to work and paying the mortgage. Frequently, the burden of living in two such opposing dimensions can virtually disable people with depression. But how do you distinguish between conventional psychological or clinical depression and spiritual crisis, whose symptoms can seem similar? To begin with, all depressions arises out of feelings of disempowerment. The balance of power in your life shifts and you feel that you are no longer calling the shots. Clinical depression generally arises from external or physical events. It may have its roots in a chemical imbalance or a traumatic life change, anything from a divorce or a loss of a loved one to being diagnosed with a serious illness. Such depression often results in an inability to function effectively and needs to be treated by an appropriate mental health professional. By contrast, spiritual depression is more likely to be triggered by an absorption in metaphysical issues than by material concerns. You may feel that you have reached a dead end, that you've been abandoned by God, or have no hope or ever experiencing divine union. Spiritual crises can sometimes be caused by a traumatic change, such as a serious illness or divorce, if it leads you to question the meaning and value of your life rather than focus entirely on your material misfortune. Clearly, the distinction between a clinical depression and a spiritual crisis can sometimes be a fine line. Another way of recognizing it is to observe the way you respond to a crisis. If you react by asking yourself, how will you ever find someone to replace your divorced spouse or lost loved one? How can you get a job or get out of a job that's killing you? Or how can you find enough money to live? More than likely, your depression is primarily psychological. If you respond specifically to feeling or to the feeling of having been rendered powerless by being consumed with anger, resentment, or blame directly towards others, you are most likely not spiritually depressed. When in doubt, of course, you should always consult your physician or mental health professional. If, however, you are asking yourself questions about the meaning of life or about why God seems so distant from you, then most likely you're in a spiritual crisis and you may need to seek out a spiritual director rather than a psychotherapist. If you determine that your depression is largely spiritual, one solution may be to surrender all your worldly fears and concerns to the divine. To let go and let God, as the saying goes. You can make a simple declaration to the divine that your own attempts to direct your spiritual life have come up empty and that you need divine assistance. Surrendering to the divine or to divine guidance is different from giving up on all your worldly goods as you would do if you were to take the traditional vow of poverty. Yet, realizing that you live under the protective field of a sacred contract which provides you with all that your life requires for the evolution of your spirit can allow you to end the struggle between your personal will and that of the divine. The act of surrender is a statement that says, I allow the divine to make my investments according to a wisdom greater than my own. Moving on to the 10th house. The 10th house is where our highest potential lies, and it aligns with the 5th and 7th chakra. The 10th house is ruled by Capricorn, the third earth sign of the astrological chart. The energy of this house works on your highest potential. It pushes you to be all that you can in your physical world and your spiritual life. What is your highest potential of your compassionate self or your generosity? What is your highest potential when it comes to empowering another? What is the highest potential you can strive for with your talent? Your highest potential is what your sacred contract is prompting you to recognize and realize, because this requires that you make choices regarding your spiritual destiny. The house corresponds to the energies of both the 5th and 7th chakra. The archetype that resides in this house is your entryway into deciphering the choices open to you and the quality of your motivations. The shadow side of your highest potential is self-sabotage or doubt or lack of faith, fear of failure, as well as fear of success and responsibility characterizes the challenges inherent into this house. These are basically fears of your own powers and empowerment and the changes they require you to make in your life. You will need to face whether you would deliberately block your highest potential from emerging and why. You will also be challenged to retain humility as you become more empowered. Pursuing your highest potential is the most difficult marathon. With each upgrade, whether personal or professional, something or someone will arise to test the depth and solidity of your inner growth. On the earthly plane, this encounter might present itself as a confrontation between you and another person who doesn't want you to change. Or you may find yourself in a relationship with someone of whom you become jealous, which will test your own potential to support another's talents and gifts. Or you may be given an opportunity to pursue a goal of inner transformation, only to discover that such opportunities always require that you leave a part of your life behind, that you make a necessary sacrifice. Some people find sacrifice and change too high a price to pay and do not pursue or fulfill their potential. The archetype in your 10th house is the indicator of how your unconscious organizes your thoughts when you are faced with choices that can lead you into fulfilling your potential. Remember that although all of your archetypal companions provide influence in every aspect of your life, the archetype that resides in this house represents the symbolic language that you want to use to begin deciphering all that your highest potential holds. Let's move on. We are now at the 11th house. The 11th house is where relationships to the world lie. It aligns with the 4th and 6th chakras. The 11th house corresponds to Aquarius, the 3rd air sign, and it rules your relationships to the external world and your ideas about the outer sphere. Your viewpoint about life in general is connected to the energy of this house. Those sentiments reflect how you see your sense of power operating within the social or global environment. People who are drawn to paths of service that have global consequences, such as an environmental causes or international peace work, have strong connections to the energy of this house. Optimism or pessimism about the future of humanity is an extension of the spiritual energy of the 11th house. The 11th house rules how you will relate your creativity to humanity and engages the energies of your 4th and 6th chakras, which regulate your heart and mind. People who are empowered by an attitude that says anything possible live in an energy field of pure 11th house potential. They are frequently larger than life, precisely because they do not think in global terms. For them, 11th house perceptions flood into their first thoughts of the day and are the last to leave their minds as they retire at the end of the day. Not all people need to start or participate in a cause to contribute positive energy to the planet. Developing the capacity to see the whole of life as beautiful and to see people as essentially living beings is like participating in a spiritual environmental movement. We have no way of measuring the power of a single thought, yet we know the attitudes and beliefs have universal consequences. Spiritual masters, popular leaders, scientific geniuses, and great artists who are dedicated to serving humanity all illustrate what good can be generated by dedicating your spirit to incarnating a single perception. You too may be the channel through which an entirely new understanding of reality will manifest. Review your life and your relationships. Look for changes that you have inspired in others who then went on to move mountains in their own lives. Most mountains, or most of the mountains we deal with, are not necessarily enormous global movements, but everyday challenges or invisible forces like attitudes. Generations benefit from even one parent deciding to become a more active father to his children or to stop hating people who are different from him. Great spiritual masters have continually directed their students to become aware of the power of their own spirits in an effort to enlighten their students about their inner potential. The external world is but a manifestation of the authority of our internal life. The archetype that resides within your 11th house is symbolic of how you view the power of your spirit in relation to the whole of life. The victim archetype on that house, if you have it there, can suggest that you find the world an intimidating place where everyone has more authority over your life than you do. On the other hand, the victim in this position in the charts of people who are on fire with courage and optimism, for them, the victim becomes a symbol of negative energy they refuse to give into, pushing themselves to limits to help themselves and others avoid being victimized. Archetypes in the 11th house causes us to evaluate how we see our place in the world and how we measure our sense of power. It may be difficult to apprehend that even while hanging out in your own home, your thoughts are influencing the whole of life. But that truth is something we are all under contracts to learn. The shadow side of the power of one's mind can be seen and many different people. An example, Adolf Hitler, Charles Manson, Jim Jones. The characteristics of the shadow side of the 11th house feed on an ego that makes one believe that the entire globe can be transformed according to the dictates of one's desires. The psyches of people in whom this shadow is active are like spider webs. They lure and entrap the multitudes who are in the search of someone to give them a vision of what life could be like if they, the powerless, had authority over others. As history tells us, such negative 11th house perceptions inevitably implode, taking their supporters with them. Last but not least, we have the 12th house, and this is where the unconscious lie. It also aligns with the 6th and 7th chakra. The 12th house corresponds to the third water sign Pisces, which is a sign of intuition, of gut instinct. This house is the underworld ruled by Pluto, or what some may call, or how it's described in the book is, she calls it the major channel into deeper guidance. The 12th house rules the unconscious mind as well as our innermost fears. The energetic nature of this house pushes our underground images into our mind through every available portal, dreams, conversations, synchronicities, encounters, any means that provide an opportunity to see a fragment of our contract in action. Uncovering your unconscious requires your intellect, intuition, and spiritual aspirations, and so this house resonates with the energies of the 6th and 7th chakras. Your intuitive abilities are a part of the energy of this house. Refer to the meaning of the first house and review the circular journey of the archetypal wheel. Note that the other houses relate to rational and emotional aspects of your nature. Forming your identity and choosing your values are largely products of the physical world. Finding a union with another person and evaluating whether you want to continue to carry your tribe's symbolic DNA in your system is very much an emotional and psychological issue. Completion of this circle, however, leads you to your intuitive voice. Intuition is our primal sense. Long before we are introduced to rational thinking, we sense life. As babies, we absorb the energy, climate of the world we live in, including the emotions of our parents and the atmosphere of our home. As we grow older, we rationalize the abilities of the mind to develop and the intuitive experiences that many children describe, such as seeing angels, but are dismissed as imagination. These psychic forces then go underground. Although usually they do not go completely silent. To sense energy information but then repress that information for lack of rational support is to court madness. Learning to speak archetypes and seeing symbolically awakens your intuition, the use of your intuition. The archetypal patterns that reside in your 12th house is your guide into your underground. Although your fears may seem huge, overbearing, each one is ultimately just a different version of the fear of change, which is by far the most powerful, obvious obstacle to the ultimate irrational act of spiritual surrender. Your 12th house experiences carry the theme of surrender. The shadow side of the 12th house can feel very much like a gothic chamber of horrors, precisely because it is so closely linked to the numerous fragments of our psyche. Many of our addictions and compulsions are rooted in our deepest fears of being abandoned, which thrive in the shadows of this house. Now that you have familiarized yourself with the nature and role of each of the 12 houses that make up the archetypal wheel, it's time to create your own wheel. By following the intuitive process outlined, You will place each of your 12 archetypes into a different house of the wheel. This is your personal archetypal wheel, and it will become the single most important roadmap to working with your archetypes and understanding your sacred contract. I will give you guys more information of that outline once we begin the next video. Or when I begin the next video, we will be starting a new chapter of sacred contracts. No, it will not be another month before I post another video, but this one has been long, to say the least. Long, yet very informative and very impactful. So, soak the knowledge of this video in and be prepared, because when I come back, we are going to make the origins of our archetypal wheel, and we are going to begin maneuvering through that and utilizing that in our everyday life so that we can furthermore understand and uncover more information of our sacred contracts. Until next time, have a good day, be safe, love life, breathe, relax, take a moment, take a walk, let go, surrender to the divine. Bye.